The issue of legislation governing pornography is becoming a major debate on the American scene. Shall legislation be further framed to abolish pornography, or does such legislation become censorship and a violation of civil rights? Before analysing the issue, let us examine the arguments for and against. In California, for example, the Clean Initiative in 1966, Proposition 16 on the ballot, was one campaign among many to combat pornography. The advocates of clean called attention to the fact that pornography in the United States has been a $2 billion business annually. The publishers of pornography openly solicit manuscripts emphasizing perversions and hardcore pornography. Prosecutions of avowedly pornographic works is difficult or impossible because existing laws are too weak. District attorneys do not initiate prosecutions because the present law is inadequate to secure convictions. It is held that, to combat both pornography and its products, criminality and venereal disease, new laws are necessary. Not so, the opponents argue. There is no necessary connection, it's claimed, between pornography and criminality, between pornography and immorality. Moreover, even if it were proven that such a connection exists, it would be wrong to pass laws against pornography because such laws would introduce a greater evil, censorship, and a loss of liberty. We are told that if pornography is the price we must pay for liberty, then we must be prepared to pay it. Liberty is too basic to the life of the man to be labakabo. Liberty is too basic to the life of man to be sacrificed for any other factor. A lesser good cannot be sacrificed for the greater and basic good. We are against pornography, many argue, but we are even more emphatically against censorship and against any and every attack on liberty. We can, as we assess these two conflicting positions, appreciate both a concern for moral standards and also a concern for liberty. The argument concerned with liberty is an important one, but it must be intelligently used. And what is liberty? Can it be limited? Or is true liberty only unlimited liberty? Liberty is defined by the dictionary as, quote, the state of being exempt from the domination of others or from restricting circumstances, end quote, but this definition, like all others, presents problems. After all, who is free from the domination of others and free from restricting circumstances? We all have some domination to face. A husband, even a wife, parents, employers, superior officers, tax collectors, the various forms of government, and so on. And supremely, we are all under the dominion and domination of God, and who is ever exempt from restricting circumstances? After all, your income is a restriction on your liberty. You can spend so much and no more. Having a family is a restricting circumstance. It definitely limits your liberty. Not good enough. Def. It definitively limits your liberty. The necessity of working is also a restriction on our liberty, as is every other circumstance in our life. Thus, according to this definition, only God is absolutely free, because only God is, quote, exempt from the domination of others and from restricting circumstances, end quote. If we look to other dictionary definitions, we are not much better off. Another reads that liberty is, quote, the power of voluntary choice, freedom from necessity, end quote. But who is ever free from necessity in this life? The point, I think, is clear. No such thing as absolute or unlimited liberty is possible or good. More than that, unlimited liberty for man is destructive of liberty itself. Can we give any man the limitation to Galbopopop? Can we give any man the unlimited liberty to do as he pleases? Can a man rob whenever he sees fit, kill at will, lie as he wishes, and generally be a law unto himself? If we permitted this, soon no one would have any liberty. the results would only be anarchy. Man's liberty, man's total liberty. Man's total liberty is always anarchy, and anarchy is the death of both law and liberty. Unless every man's liberty is limited by law, no liberty is possible for any man. The criminal law and the civil law impose mutual limitations on us, on all of us. The criminal law and the civil law impose mutual limitations on all of us in order to provide the maximum liberty for all of us. As a result, we must be aware of those who talk about defending liberty when they actually want to promote anarchy. When we are told that there can be no laws against pornography without endangering liberty, we must challenge their claim to be interested in liberty. There is no area where freedom is unlimited. Take freedom of speech, for example. No man has a right to slander others, nor do our laws allow him the liberty to do so at will. Neither do we allow any man the liberty to shout "fire" in a crowded theatre when there is no fire. Freedom of speech does not give any man the right to walk into the floor of Congress and speak his mind. His liberty is limited not only as to where he can say it, but also as to what he says. This does not mean that I lack freedom to speak my mind if it be done decently and in order. The freedom of press means the liberty to publish, but it does not mean liberty to publish libelous statements, nor does it mean that any man can demand that his freedom of press be subsidized to enable him to publish. A man has the liberty to publish if he provides the cost of publication or interests a publisher in doing so. Moreover, the contents of what is published are also subject to limitations. Libel has already been cited. No man has the right or liberty to publish another man's property, to publish stolen or copyrighted material. Again, no man has the right or liberty to publish materials violating the privacy of others. There are all kinds of legitimate and necessary restrictions on every kind of liberty man has, and these are necessary for the maintenance of liberty, because liberty cannot be equated with anarchy. One of the necessary limitations on liberty is the suppression of pornography. Certainly, mistakes have sometimes been made here, but they have also been made with reference to laws governing libel, privacy, slander, treason, crime, and every limitation on liberty. Neither man nor his laws are perfect, nor will they ever be in this life. The alternative to perfection is not anarchy, it is a realistic and working use of laws to further both human liberty and crime. Yeah, right. Sorry. Forgot that. I pressed too lightly. It is a realistic and working use of laws to further both human liberty and law. One of the basic premises of the American system and a basic article of Christian faith is that man's liberty is under law. The purpose of law in the United States has historically been to further liberty by law. Basic to all moral anarchism is the insistence that liberty be gained only by freedom from law. From the beatniks and hippies to the student left and civil disobedience agitators, this belief in liberty as freedom from law runs deep. To prove that they are free, these immature and perverse minds insist on breaking some laws to demonstrate that they are free men. But moral anarchy is always the prelude to statist tyranny, and this vaunted freedom from law ends always in a freedom from liberty. Liberty, then, is under law, and it requires careful and Liberty, then, is under law, and it requires careful and conscientious legislation to maintain the social structure in that state of law which best promotes liberty. Limited liberty is the only kind of liberty possible to man. To dream of more is to endanger liberty itself. The Reverend John Cotton, Puritan divine, wrote in the earliest days of New England, quote, "It is necessary that all power on earth be limited," end quote. This premise became basic to all colonial governments and to the United States. The restoration of true liberty requires the restoration of true law. It is a dangerous and totally false idea that freedom means an escape from law. This can only be true. This can only be true. Bring it down. This can be true only if the escape is from such systems as communism, and communism is not true law, but tyranny. To oppose in the name of liberty legislation against pornography is thus to favour anarchy rather than liberty. The basic premise of American law calls for liberty of speech and freedom of press, subject to the necessary restrictions of law and order. The purpose of current legislation proposals concerning pornography is not the destruction of liberty, but its furtherance. It is a destruction of the freedom of press if libel is made legal, if stealing copyrighted materials is made permissible, and if violations of privacy are left ungoverned. The press then becomes a tyrant and a menace. It is out of control. It can invade your home, steal your writings, and also lie about you. Pornography, similarly, is destructive of social order and of liberty. It is an insistence on the so-called right of moral anarchy, and, since its basic premise is anarchy, it brings anarchy also to every realm. Liberty goes hand in hand with responsibility. The laws limiting freedom of speech and freedom of press are laws requiring responsibility. Responsibility and liberty reinforce and strengthen each other. But pornography demands a world of moral anarchy, a world in which anything and everything goes, especially if it is perverted. As a matter of plain fact, the pornographer is hostile to law and order and to Christian morality. No. As a matter of plain fact, the pornographer is hostile to law and order and to Christian morality. Being committed to moral anarchy, this is necessarily so. Being irresponsible, he is at war with the world of moral responsibility. The defence of pornography on the ground of liberty, of freedom of press, is a false one, because the essence of pornography is dedicated moral irresponsibility, and this moral anarchism is an enemy of liberty under law. Pornography denies the very concept of law. It believes in a world without law and is dedicated to creating it. It must destroy liberty under law in order to usher in anarchy and a world without law. The defence of our historic American system of liberty under law requires then that we wage war against pornography, because pornography is a major enemy to liberty. The opponents of pornography are therefore no threat to liberty. Rather, they are its friends and defenders. Under the cloak and name of liberty, the pornographers are out to destroy liberty. The real champions of liberty are, in every age, hostile to pornography. Alrighty, folks, let's move on to the following chapter, chapter 4. I don't know why I'm in the middle of the book. Why? Why would I be in the middle of the book? Here we go. All right, chapter 4, the politics of pornography. Let's go. 4. The politics of pornography. In order to understand some of the major currents of our day, it is necessary to recognize that one of the central purposes of pornography is political. An analysis of the politics of pornography is therefore essential. Before doing so, it is necessary to call attention to a distinction made between pornography and obscenity. The novelist Henry Miller has said, quote, "Obscenity is a cleansing process, whereas pornography only adds to the murk. Wherever a taboo is broken, something good happens, something revitalizing." End quote. Miller is, by his own statement, a champion of obscenity, but hostile to pornography. What is the distinction, if there is one? Basically, Miller's distinction is this. Pornography is dirt for dirt's sake, whereas obscenity has as its purpose the systematic destruction of law and moral order, a revolutionary reordering of society. This distinction is only partially true. Obscenity does have this revolutionary purpose, consciously and openly. Pornography is more exploitative, but it has nonetheless an implicit or explicit revolutionary purpose. It is hostile to morality and law, and it encourages and favours rebellion against morality. As a result, it has political implications no less than Miller's obscenity. In discussing the politics of pornography, we are therefore analysing the basic position of the whole field, pornography and obscenity. While there are differences in emphasis, the essential position is the same. Now, the first thing which is apparent in pornography is its obvious hatred of morality, its marked distaste for biblical faith and morals. Moral restraint is seen as bondage for man, as slavery which must be destroyed. As a result, pornography indulges endlessly in long, tasteless and highly emotional attacks on morality, on the sanctity of marriage, on monogamy, and on every kind of moral inhibition. It seeks to fan the flames of moral rebellion, to see morality as dull and restrictive, and immorality and perversion as exciting and liberating. Although people will attempt to prove almost anything these days, it would be an impossibility to prove that pornography is not hostile to biblical faith and morality because it is so obvious. Because it so obviously reeks with hatred and hostility. A second observation is equally obvious. Pornography sees a tremendous appeal in moral evil. Morality is seen as tedious and confining, as utterly boring and restrictive, whereas evil is portrayed as man's liberation. Evil has the potency of a Evil has the potency of a magnetic for some reason that's difficult. Evil has the potency of a magnetic force for the pornographer. The vitality, potency and possibility of life are wrapped up in evil. Truly to live means for him evil, a commitment to and an involvement in moral evil. Man is not really alive, we are told, if he lives morally. Life means evil. It means what is called sin and perversion. Only the person who sins is truly alive, it is held. Evil for these people is life. Third, it can be further stated that for the pornography, morality is death. To confine men and women to the prison house of morality, marriage, law and order is seen as equivalent to a sentence of death. Since evil is life, morality is logically death, and this is the religious faith of the pornography. It's all right. And this is the religious faith of pornography. The gospel for man is thus evil. Sin is the way of salvation and the way to life and liberty. This faith is insistently presented, and with a religious fervour and with good reason, because its roots are in an ancient religious faith, Manichaeanism, and also in various cults of chaos. For this faith, sin is life. Researchers a few years ago found that many people commit adultery not because of any desire for the other person, but because of a fear that they will miss out on life if they do not sin. This is in essence the position of pornography. It offers sin and evil, and it declares it to be true life precisely because it is sin and evil. Fourth, pornography manifests a hostility to the very idea of law and morality. Law means, for it's something inhibiting and stultifying, a deadening restraint upon man. Morality is held to be the dead hand of the past, the fearful and death-oriented will of men bound to superstition and fear. The destiny of man is to be free from law, according to these men, and the way to be free is to begin by breaking the law, by violating morality. Man's freedom is to be free from law, free to do as one pleases, and the mark of this freedom is the deliberate violation of all law and order. Very briefly, this position is one of moral anarchism. Man's greatest enemy is religion, morality, and law. Eliminate religious and moral law, and all evils of human life will disappear. Man and the state can then reconstruct society in terms of man's liberation from God and create a truly human order, the great society of humanism, the city of man. At the second annual conference of socialist scholars, one of the leading lecturers called for, quote, the collective worker in a collective society, end quote, and for, quote, the destruction of monogamic bourgeois family as we know it, end quote, and for, quote, complete freedom of sexual life, end quote. In other words, man's freedom, he stated, involves being, quote, exempt from worship, end quote, as well as morality. But man's freedom also involves a Marxist state. Slavery is religion and morality, and freedom is Marxist socialism. Moral anarchism is the tool and instrument of totalitarianism, of socialism and dictatorship. Moral anarchism is used to destroy every form of social stability and order in order to pave the way for totalitarian order. Christianity gives to man the faith and character for self-government, and morality is the essence of self-discipline and self-government. Dissolve man's self-government, and you make a totalitarian authority over him a social necessity. It becomes apparent, therefore, that the link between pornography and revolutionary totalitarianism is a necessary one. The rise of totalitarianism has always been preceded by moral anarchism, and those seeking tyrannical... That's pretty good. The rise of totalitarianism has always been preceded by moral anarchism, and those seeking tyrannical powers over man have always worked to reduce man to a dependent position by undercutting his moral self-government and responsibility. The rise and triumph of pornography is a prelude to totalitarianism. Moral anarchy is the seedbed of tyranny. This then explains the relationship between pornography and totalitarianism. The champions of pornography talk loudly about liberty. Any legislation against pornography is protested as hostile to freedom of press and civil rights generally, but these same people are curiously silent about protesting the inroads of totalitarianism, of Marxism, into the social order. If they are interested in liberty, why not defend it against Marxism? The answer is that they are hostile to liberty, hence their defence of pornography is an instrument whereby pornography is an instrument whereby man's moral liberty can be eroded and destroyed. Our sixth point is thus an obvious conclusion. The politics of pornography is a moral anarchism whose purpose is revolution, a revolution against Christian civilization. The dean of modern pornographers and a great revolutionist was the Marquis de Sade. The Marquis called for total freedom for every kind of sexual perversion. For Sade, quote, true wisdom, end quote, meant, quote, not repressing our vice, since these vices constitute almost the only happiness in our lives. To repress them would be to become our executioners, end quote. The Marquis called for the abolition of the death penalty, laws against theft, laws against murder, prostitution, adultery, incest, rape, sodomy, and all else. Equality required that all acts have equal standing before the law, except, of course, Christian moral laws such as monogamy. laws protecting property, and similar legislations. For Assad, Christianity and its moral laws should be abolished by law. All things else should be accepted. He defended all kinds of crimes and perversions as natural and good. Quote, "Can we possibly imagine nature giving us the possibility of committing a crime which could offend her? The most independent of men are those closest to nature, are savages. With impunity they devote themselves to murder every day." End quote. The Marquis de Sade wrote with honesty. In his books, the politics of pornography is open and obvious. The contemporary pornographers are less open about stating their revolutionary goals, but they are still very obvious. The politics of pornography is simply the politics of revolution. The sexual aspect of pornography is the most obvious aspect. It is an excellent come-on for the stupid and immature, but the underlying purpose is far more extensive in scope. It is nothing less than revolution. It is the reordering of life and society in terms of moral anarchism. In Esquire, June 1963, Anthony Lewis wrote on, quote, "Sex and the Supreme Court," end quote, stating that after the Supreme Court's Roth decision, quote, "No serious literary work can now be termed constitutionally obscene," end quote. All that a pornographer needs to do, if this be true, is to call attention to his serious purpose, namely his revolutionary purpose to seek a escape from prosecution. The, quote, "serious," end quote, purpose can be called sexual reform. Thus, in the new leader for September the 2nd. Thus, in the new leader for September the 2nd, 1963, Stanley Edgar Hyman, writing on, quote, "In defense of pornography," end quote, wrote, quote, "These books may teach and encourage a wider range of heterosexual activity, oral and anal as well as genital, and should be welcomed if they do," end quote. In other words, the increasing defense of pornography is that pornography itself is a socially redeeming activity and is therefore its own justification. In short, the plea for pornography is becoming the fact that it is pornography. Many things can be said at this point. Certainly, new and clearer legislation is necessary and urgently needed. Moreover, it is necessary that we recognise the radical and political implications of pornography. These things and more need to be done. But positive actions must also accompany them, the reordering of life and society in terms of biblical faith and standards. The basic answer to moral anarchism is the strengthening of Christian moral discipline. We need and must have sound legislations, but we must also establish the right kind of theological and moral foundations. If the foundations are destroyed, the structure will not stand. "Except the Lord build a house, they labour in vain that build it." Psalm 127, 1. All right, folks, I'm glad. I was going to say I'm glad you enjoyed it. I have no idea whether you hated it or enjoyed it. That would be extremely presumptuous on my part. Thanks very much for tuning in to me in the booth, to Rushdoony, me narrating Rushdoony, in the Booth of Truth. It's around about half an hour. I'm going to end it there. If you want to support the work, like, share, and if you want to support it financially, go to nathanteacher.com and go to donate, where you can make a one-off or regular donation to help me do more better work. Okay, God bless, and hope to see you soon.